Welcome, everyone. I'm super excited here to present building and scaling on platforms. I have the fortune of sitting down with Amazon Web Services Principal Business Development Manager, Elio Narciso. Elliot, welcome to the conference.
Thank you, Brian. It's a pleasure. As you said, my name is Elio. It's an Italian name, an Italian living in New York City, which I love dearly. And yes, I'm a principal BD at AWS. And I'm also the program manager for the AWS Global Startup Program. It's a program we started about 2 years ago to support the go-to-market of fast-scaling mid to late stage startups, which are venture-backed and our product market fit so that we can enhance their go-to-market in three big areas: product development, co-marketing, and co-selling. And it's great to be here with you, Bryant. And actually, before the session, you and I talked briefly, and you told me about that you have quite a history with
Yeah,
AWS. I'd love to hear about that.
totally. I mean, that's why I'm so excited to do the session because AWS has had such a massive impact on me professionally. So back in 2008, I was working at Intuit, and that's where I was actually on the same team as Vlad, Webflow CEO and my co-founder. And that was actually the first place that I've ever used AWS. So we were on a very small team, and we were trying to scale the SaaS application. So Intuit's first SaaS application, and we're trying to figure out where to host this thing. We're trying to figure out how to go from 0 to 1, and it was just Vlad and myself inside of this massive company. So instead of going through IT and figuring out how to rack servers in Intuit's data centers, I went a little vogue and maybe signed Intuit up for our very first AWS account, where stood up a variety of different services. I think at the time it was just EC2 using EBS and snapshots and S3, and we actually got that business off the ground with the help of AWS. And I think now Intuit has completely sunsetted all of their data centers, and from what I heard, they may have even sold the data centers that they built to AWS, which is really interesting. And then after that, I also brought AWS into my first company, Vungle, which is actually a leading mobile app monetization network. And we scaled super quickly with the help of AWS there. So we were essentially an ad network, and we scaled to 100 million unique devices with our SDK. And it was right when DynamoDB came out, and we were able to leverage that to help us really scale that company as well. So not just Webflow, which we'll get to, but two really incredible businesses before it as well. So, Elio, it sounds like AWS has really come a long way, right? So it's helped startups go from 0 to 1. I'd love to hear where AWS is at now and the journey it's been on.
Yeah, I mean, your story is great. I mean, you started in 2008. AWS started in 2006, so you were quite early as an adopter. Actually, we just celebrated the 15th anniversary of the first EC2 instance, and so it's really amazing to see. This is we're talking about 15 years. It's a long time, but it's not that much of a time. And so if you think that in 2006, if you wanted to start a company, you not only had to build the product, which is the key thing that you wanted to build for your customers, but you also had to think about buying servers and infrastructure that goes around it. You'd lose a ton amount, an amount of time and resources just to do that. That would clearly defocus, and also it would create a lot of obstacles for true innovation. And so in 2006, AWS introduced this innovation, and startups were really the first companies to really embrace this. And so if you think about companies like Lyft, Stripe, Slack, Grab, Netflix, Airbnb, DoorDash, all of these companies were born, around that time, in 2007, 8, 9. And so the key thing that they did was we just focus on the product. We just focus on the innovation that we want to deliver to the market and forget about all of the infrastructure. Um, so I think that that's why I'm excited, like for the work that we're doing for startups in my own team, even though the evolution obviously of AWS is that now finally companies like Intuit, large enterprises are fully on board or are getting, like on board with the cloud because they have seen the tremendous amount of innovation that moving to the cloud can bring. And so for us, like like the fact that we can empower entrepreneurs to build and scale their companies faster and more cost effectively is a great motivation for continuing the innovation in the infrastructure. And maybe Brian, you can bring some example about your own infrastructure, where you guys are at right now, and if you
Yeah,
can give us a sense about that.
we started very simply. It was a few different EC2 instances behind an elastic load balancer, and in the 8.5 years since we started the company, Webflow, I think I just looked this up, has recently crossed 10 billion page views a month. I think sometimes we peak our EC2 instances up to 800 instances at a time. And with the help of Kubernetes and auto scaling, it'll come down to 200 during the lulls. I think we have hundreds of millions of objects in our S3 buckets, which is wild. And with the help of AWS, we've been able to build really robust things to fortify our business. So things like multi-region, disaster recovery, with all the different AWS regions around the world, we've really leveraged that to really build a very robust product for our customers. I'm proud to say, which is, our products have had experienced downtime, but when we think about the scale of Webflow's growth and all the different customers that are using us now, I think we've done a pretty good job scaling our infrastructure footprint. So, we're using things like Lambdas, ECS, API Gateway, CloudFront, and the crazy thing is that I think we've 3x'd our business in the past couple years, while our EC2 bill has only grown, I think, 45%. So I think we've reached a point where the economies of scale are definitely very favorable for us. And that just speaks to the point that AWS has really helped our particular startup kind of evolve over time. So I'm curious, Elio, this is probably just a small smattering of AWS tools and services that Webflow uses. I'm curious how AWS's product roadmap has scaled over time.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking as you were speaking, I mean, like the numbers are amazing. I also want to be mindful of people that don't know what an EC2 or an S3 is. So like EC2 is basically like very simply like, virtual computer, right? So instead of actually buying a computer, a server, like, now, and since, 15 years ago, now you can buy a virtual computer, essentially on which you can run your computer application. S3 is like storage, right? So like just like on your computer, you have like, folders. Then like, in S3, you have like, buckets and objects. And so the bucket is like a folder and you put an object which has like, the actual content plus maybe metadata associated with it. And so that's how we started, like visually, you can see it's like pretty basic stuff, right? So I need a computer and I need storage for everything that I need to put on that computer, right? And then obviously, once you solve those two massive issues, because those were like the key drivers of like, investment in infrastructure, then we started to add services to manage those, services to maybe do analytics with the huge data that people were bringing to those storage, buckets. And then, maybe from analytics, we want to do maybe some AI ML because we want to analyze at scale, like that tremendous amount of data. And maybe that data is also coming from IoT and so forth. Right now, we have over 200 services. But I think that what's interesting about this evolution is that, like, always, trying to simplify and innovate on behalf of the customers. And so customers, just like, in our own companies, we just want to focus on what we are good at, right? And so the same evolution that, we are experiencing and we have experienced in the infrastructure, you know, is happening and will happen also in other fields, right? So because at the end of the day, you know it's a very complex world out there, like from technologies and products. So you can really bring innovation if you are hyper focused on what you're good at. Put that really simply. You have to focus on what's important for your customers, and like, so that you can develop expertise on top of it. And so I think that what we have seen and will continue to see in the years to come on the infrastructure side is happening also in, other fields. And, we hear about like this concept of software as a service, right? Which I think people associate it more with like a pricing model. You pay like on a subscription base, but actually the wording is software as a service. So like it's not software that I have to start and develop from scratch, but I can buy, as a service and use it for my own needs. And so I think that we will see, so the fact that we see so many SaaS companies, software as a service, is because, software is becoming, a service. And so you don't need to build everything. Again, the same thing that happened, in the infrastructure with AWS is happening in software. And so the people don't have to build software for every little, piece of their company, but just focus the innovation on what's important. And that's why, we're looking at, now the growth of companies like Bubble, like, Zapier, Notion. These are all companies in like, a really growing space, which is there is going to be less need to develop software and code, from scratch in every area of building the company. And instead, like, companies will be focused on building only the software that their customer needs. And so, Webflow is actually, and obviously, like in the middle of all of this, and
Yeah.
you guys are part of this revolution. So, I'd love to hear from you, Bryant, about like how do you think about this, and how do you see Webflow,
Yeah,
operating in this
totally.
space?
As we were talking, Webflow is essentially continuing to add those layers of abstraction on top of software. And just in the same way that AWS made it easy to manage infrastructure, and then you're moving up the stack, Webflow's starting at the stack of a website, and we're providing you all these abstraction layers over things like HTML and CSS and JavaScript and hosting, so that a typical web developer, agency, freelancer, all the way up to a Fortune 500 company doesn't have to worry about, a build system, or a deployment system, or monitoring. They really, really just focus on what Elio you just said, which is just focus on what the customers want. And for us, the marketing site is the face of a company. So Webflow provides that bespoke professional ability for you to create that type of marketing site for you to stand out. And I think that's something that we've really, really leaned on, which is like, what are all those abstractions that you don't have to build anymore, that you don't have to hand code anymore? And that those are all things that we really base our product development on. And it sounds like Amazon is an extremely customer focused company, and it's obviously wildly successful. Webflow also really, really thinks about some of those innate needs for our customers, and frankly, we've had to really think about how at each stage of the company, we want to focus our strategic view. So in the very, very beginning of Webflow, actually, we really just wanted to focus on building a product for product market fit. Like, we just
Mm.
had to talk to customers all the time. The founders were responding to 40, 50, 100 support tickets a day. And it actually really helped us build that intuition for what type of product to build. And then as we got more and more traction, we started to scale the company, and we started to think about, okay, well, how do we actually build a stronger top of funnel so that more people can find out about Webflow? How do we want to build some of those go-to-market motions, such as marketing to get the word out about Webflow, and then eventually sales to help us navigate, the procurement processes that some larger companies have. And throughout the way, it's been great to not have to worry about certain things like, oh, my data center needs to be climate controlled and things like that.
Yeah.
But there's just been a lot of different services out there for companies like Webflow to lean on. And I think as we were talking, the AWS Startup Program sounds just like a really incredible resource. So Elio, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the startup program and how it's been designed to help companies like Webflow scale.
Yeah, I think, I mean, like, we could spend hours on this. I think that what's exciting, like even in the program, right? So the program is for startups. And so we built it because like we have a ton of, like support for early stage startups. I mean, we have like the Activate program, maybe you've heard of it, where like, we provide free technical resources. We provide AWS credits when you are starting your company. Activate will provide, this year, like around $1 billion in AWS credits to startups that are starting. But what's interesting is that, like, so we do a lot for early stage, right? The, couple of people in a garage, let's say. And then as they grow, we saw that there was a need to help those companies, particularly those that are focusing on selling software or, or products to other businesses and maybe enterprises. That was like, a need to better support their go-to-market, and so to remove barriers and frictions so that they could actually focus on customers. And so what's interesting, I think, that we talk about the customer obsession. So yes, it is a program for mid to late stage startups that are doing extremely well, already have product market fit, but that at the end of the day want a service, a business customer, whether that's like a small business or an enterprise. We typically focus more on enterprise startups, but like, also like, B2B. And so what we have done with the program is like actually push the startups to think about like, what does the enterprise need, right? What does other businesses need? So they need like a solution or service that is super reliable, that is super secure. I mean, like, security, number one priority if you're working, in the stuff that we work on. And then once, you make sure that you have done that, what else do they need? Well, they really need to understand how they can use your product to solve the problems that they have. And so we work with startups in order to craft the messaging, not from a perspective of how can you sell, right? But how can you basically let companies understand better what you do and how you can solve the problem for them. And obviously, like, inject resources so that we can do campaigns around, taking this message to the market. And then the other piece is like, the actual act of like building bridges with customers so that we can enable the startups to sell their solutions and products to those enterprises or businesses. But at the end of the day, it's all about the customer. And so whether the customer is a startup or if the customer is an enterprise, is like, about what do they need in order to succeed. And
Yeah.
so that's how we build the program, right? So it is for startups, but we look at like, startups selling to other businesses. And so
Yeah,
you
and,
look at
and
the business perspective.
it's just amazing to see that like once AWS has built just like the requirements for just a really robust compute and storage platform, now we have the fortune of working with people like yourself that can really enable companies to think about their go to market and to co-distribute, co-develop, co-market. And eventually that's also where Webflow wants to go as well, which is like we don't just want to provide underlying technology and product to help you build a no code service, but we think about the ecosystem that's around Webflow now, and how Webflow now has Webflow for educators, Webflow for students, Webflow for startups. So we also have a startup program, not
Yeah.
nearly as successful as yours and at the scale of yours, Elio, but we also have a startup program where the hypothesis is that if we can work with companies at the inception phase and we offer a set of tools and services to make them really, really successful using our no code visual development website platform. We can hopefully grow along the stage of that, our customers companies growth, and really think about all the various stages of supporting them. And actually that's also going to dovetail quite nicely into some of our future platform ambitions. So I know this title of this talk is about building and growing on platforms, but Webflow, we see ourselves as a platform as well. And if for those in the audience that don't know, there's actually hundreds of third-party developers that are currently building bespoke no-code components or plugins on top of Webflow, like the Thin Suites and the Jet Boosts of the world, providing real value to the entire Webflow ecosystem. And similar to AWS, and we may have drawn inspiration from it, is we really want to be thinking about how do we want to create all the building blocks so that third-party developers and companies can build on top of each other's innovations. And can't share too much today about what direction that exactly is, about where we're headed, but that's definitely a big aspiration of ours, to become that platform for visual web development in the future.
Maybe you cannot share today, but I'm eager to get the ping or notification once you can share that. But what I think it's also happening is that maybe just like AWS, we started and then startups immediately got the message, right, and started building on top of AWS, and then came the enterprises, right? But at the end of the day, it's there are people in startups and there are people at the enterprises. Just the set of needs are slightly different, and so the priorities are different, the budgets are different. But I think that also in your case, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but in your case, you started for the freelancers, you started for the small agency, but then immediately as you build for those people, these are people that need your product, then you start understanding also different type of personas, and maybe they are in larger agencies, maybe they are in larger companies, or maybe they are teams within enterprises. So I think that that's an evolution that I don't know if you're seeing already, and maybe you can talk about that, but for sure will happen, right?
Yeah, totally. And you hit the nail on the head, which is Webflow really singularly focused on the freelancer and the small agency, because we felt like they were the most disenfranchised. Similar to AWS, probably, a lot of startups just didn't have the capital to go and buy rack space inside of a data center. We also took the view that freelancers and agencies just didn't have the technical capacity or the developers on staff to be able to actually execute really top-notch websites from an aesthetic point of view, but then also from a performance perspective as well. So I think definitely what we've seen is as we've scaled the company, as we've seen Webflow get adopted by more and more customers, all the way up to the Fortune 500 now, what we've seen is that we still had to really focus on what that core value proposition of Webflow was, and that is just the speed to market, the performance aspects, the aesthetic capabilities of our platform, and then really to see how we want to build the right go-to-market motions within to support adoption from those larger companies where, like you said, they care about security, they care about support, they care about scale. And that's been something that's been really amazing to see, where companies like Zendesk now, companies like Pacific Life, Shift.com, they're all adopting Webflow in that capacity, where they're seeing some of the security and the scale and the support that we can provide there. So we're actually on time. Elio, this is amazing. I would want to close out on something maybe a little bit about the region of Italy that you told me that you're from. For those that don't know, maybe Elio, tell me where you're from and what that region's most known for, and why we must go visit.
Yeah, when we met, we met to do this, and like I'm very glad that we did. But then when we met, and I told you I was from Italy, you asked me like, where from, in Italy from, and I told you from Puglia. It's Puglia, and it's in the south of Italy. It's the actual heel of the boot. And you told me one of your best friends is like, father, I think, is from Puglia, which was pretty amazing. It's a great place. People ask me why I left, but like, New York City is also a great place. But like, it's a great place because it has like, it's surrounded by sea in the Mediterranean. Food is amazing. And actually, I have like, a gem for you. Just today, my parents sent me like pictures from like, we have like a little, place in the, the countryside, and we produce olive oil. And so today, they pick, they had people pick the olives off of the tree, and so like I'm impatiently awaiting for the olive oil to come, from that batch. So it's a really
Is it
great
like
print.
grape? Do you like step on the olives and like oil comes
No,
out? How does
it's
that work?
much harder. Like, so I have done that. My aunt and uncle used to do, to have like grapes, and like, that actually one of my memories as a child is to step on the grapes. But the olives need like, much more pressure because, it's really hard.
Much
I mean,
harder.
it's not the olive that you buy in the store. It's much harder and much smaller. So no, they take the olives, and then they bring it to a place, and then like, they do
Impressive.
what they do. But the olive oil is impressive. So food is amazing. Like the countryside and like the coastline is amazing, and like people are really nice. And yeah, so there's been, like I told you, a couple of like high profile, famous people weddings in the last couple of years. Madonna celebrated her birthday this summer, so definitely
Amazing.
go visit Puglia if you can.
All right, Madonna, I'm going to hit you up for recommendations. Thank you so much, everyone. This is Elio. Thank you so much for joining me
Thank you. That was great.
here at No Code Conference. Thank you, everyone.